episode 46 of the Dorton and Doetkott Debate podcast. I am Lucas Dorton. Obviously, this is not Nick Doetkott. This man in front of you, good buddy, broadcasted some hockey together, but it is none other than Aaron Fitzner. Aaron, how you doing tonight?
I am good. Thank you for having me. I appreciate that.
Yeah, no problem. We had to get a Toronto Blue Jays fan, and you're the only Toronto Blue Jays fan that I know. So I figured, hey, I'll ask you, see if he wants to do it or not. But I'm happy you're able to come on and do this.
Yeah, you had to. It's not a privilege, apparently, eh?
Yeah, no, I said I wanted to.
Okay.
I'll cut that out in the editing parts afterwards. But yeah, so first off, before we start talking about Toronto, I want to get to know a little bit more about you and maybe for the people that are listening as well too. So give me a little bit of background for yourself. How'd you become a Toronto fan? And yeah.
So being from Canada, we have a plethora of choices for who you should be a fan of when it comes to baseball because of all of our teams. So
right.
The closest team to my hometown was the Edmonton Cracker Cats, which was an old Double-A team. But no, being Canadian, the vast majority of Canadians are Blue Jays fans, and I am in that same realm. So just born into it. The whole family by inheritance is also Blue Jays fans, though for the most part, I think hockey would be kind of the only topic of discussion, depending what time of the year it is. But yeah, born into it, being Canadian, and been a Blue Jays fan my whole life. I took a little bit of, I wouldn't say a break because they were still my number one team, but I did follow the Giants and the A's quite closely for a while, which works out really well now that I'm in the Bay Area. But Blue Jays have always had my heart, and luckily it seems like they're actually going to take care of it for the first time in a long time this season. So
I don't think I could have put it any better than that. Take care of your heart.
Yeah.
The Rockies are not doing that for me, so
Shoot, yeah, that's a stinger. I actually, not necessarily a baseball topic, but my fiance once asked me, like, being an Oilers fan, if McDavid was ever traded, what would you do? And I said I just wouldn't watch hockey for a year. So I'd imagine this is probably kind of what you're going through right now.
I think this is the least excited that I have ever been for a Major League Baseball season in my entire life. The least excited I've ever been. Yeah. Sucks. But you know what? We're not talking about the Rockies. We're talking about a team that has promise and that has potential, and the Toronto Blue Jays. So we'll just get right into the swing of things here. Talking about last season, obviously it was a shortened season, 60 games. They finished 32-28, which was good enough to make the postseason. Ended up playing Tampa and then losing, getting swept 2-0 in that series. So I want to ask you, first off, going into the season, short season, long season or not, what was kind of your expectations of how you thought Toronto might do last year?
Not over 500. So I think everyone was kind of happily impressed. And I think that people were even more happily impressed because we did it without necessarily the stardom of what we thought was going to come from Guerrero. So that was a big deal, knowing that we could go over 500 while Guerrero is what we're hoping, but seemingly not at his best too. The boy has dropped 30 pounds during the pandemic, which, however that happens, doesn't matter to us. He did it. So we're hoping he hasn't lost any of the power from the belly once it gets swung around. But yeah, I think 32-28, honestly, if we were told that was going to be our record after 60 games last year, we would have been ecstatic, and still are ecstatic given the circumstances. So it was a tough matchup once we got to the playoffs. We did not match up well against the Rays in the regular season, so we kind of felt like that's how it was going to go, especially after that first game when we gave up so many runs. But the fact that we even got there was huge.
Well, especially, and I agree with you 100%. I really didn't expect much from Toronto, and I think the main reason behind that was just because, a lot of the people that they have on their team that they are hoping to be stars, a lot of young guys. Toronto seems like to be a very young team, and guys that have a lot of potential. Like you mentioned, Vlad Jr., Kevin Biggio, Bo Bichette, kind of the big three there as far as the young stars go. But I think that was really cool to see. And a lot of people are saying, oh, well, it was 60 games. Doesn't really count. Doesn't matter. At the end of the day, you got to play the schedule that's in front of you. And they played the schedule that was in front of them, and they were good enough to make the playoffs. So you got to give credit to them.
Yeah, it doesn't matter to us what the schedule was. I mean, if you coming out with 32 wins, I think there's a lot of teams that would have prayed for 32 wins, and they can. Yeah. I mean, you can talk a tough talk when your team doesn't go there and bring any amount of excuses that you want. But 60 games, what every team had, and some teams did better than others, and I think the Blue Jays definitely exceeded a lot of expectations, even with that.
Sure. So I guess, and we'll get to predictions later. So I'm not necessarily asking for a prediction now, but going into next season, do you expect, kind of a leap from those kind of the main three younger stars that I mentioned? We'll get into free agent acquisitions and stuff shortly, but do you think they can make that next step to be legit stars for this team?
I do. I think Bo Bichette is pretty close as is, which is nice. I mean, he had over, I think he like 35 or somewhere between 30 and 35 RBIs last year, which 60 game season. I mean, he's basically on pace to get 70 or 75 coming off a short rookie season as well, right? So I think if he can capitalize on that even a little bit more, get up to 80 or 90, he was definitely the bright spot of the three. Kevin Biggio, also very good, not too far behind him, but it was the Vlad Guerrero that I think everyone was expecting more from, and he was basically the exact same in terms of RBI as Bo Bichette, definitely not batting average. But nonetheless, those three, they were the anchors for the team. They were three of the top 5 run getters for the team, and they were only within 2 years of their first game, right? So it's only going to go up from here. I think that Guerrero Jr. still has a very high projection, regardless of his stats last year. A lot of people were really harping on him, and I'm here thinking, like, the guy's 21 or 22 years old. Like, if you saw Aaron Judge at 21 or 22, you probably would have said much worse things, let alone the fact that Guerrero Jr. is in the big leagues getting an RBI more consistently than every second game. So, I think that that's a great anchor. I think that the Teoscar Hernandez kind of bright spot was also huge for him. That's the guy that everyone forgets about because he's not one of the big 3 rookies, but he's another guy that's going to be coming back, and he had a great season. A lot of it was a hot streak, and we understand that. But even if he's not hot, even if he's only 80% of that hot streak, he could still put up 80 to 90. So in terms of the batting order and the batting order alone, I think that it is going to be a lot of smiles from Blue Jays fans.
Good. Yeah, I think Toronto is definitely going to be one of the most watched teams in baseball this year, not just for, the free agent acquisitions that they have made so far, but also for the crop of young guys that they have on their team. I think a lot of people are really excited to see, me included, how these guys pan out. And Toronto's, obviously I don't really have any affiliation with Toronto. I've never minded them, and I think it'd be cool to see those guys develop into stars. And I think a lot of people, including yourself, like you said, could pan out. But go on. Yeah.
I was just going to add, that's kind of the nice part about being a fan of a team that represents the whole country is not a lot of people have terribly negative thoughts about Canada. I think for the most part, thoughts about Canada are warm. And so I think that people would be perfectly fine with the Blue Jays winning games as long as it's not against their team, simply because it's just neutral feelings all around. It's like when the Raptors went to the finals, right? Like, you take down all the big bad teams that people have whatever rivalries against, but I mean, what do you have against the Raptors? They've never been there. It's going to be like the Blue Jays, right? Like, we've made it past the wild card series, but it's the divisional series or the championship series that always gets us, right? I mean, we haven't really made any enemies, and outside of New York and Boston, I don't think there's any teams that really hate us. And I think even with New York and Boston, there's 27 other fan bases that would rather cheer for us than those two teams. So that's definitely the nice part about being kind of in the neutral zone there.
Yeah. So I do want to ask, so obviously living in Canada, it's a hockey area, like you mentioned there. There's kind of no way getting around that. But when the Blue Jays are playing during the season, are fans really excited? Obviously, like you mentioned, they don't have a whole lot of other baseball teams to cheer for. But are fans pretty much excited to get into baseball and people showing up to the games? And how is the atmosphere, I guess, as far as when Toronto baseball comes around.
Yeah, the tough part about Canada is that I think when you, for example, for you being from Colorado, at least the state of, there's kind of part of your identity is with the teams that are around there, because that's how a lot of people even identify, is when if you say, hey, I'm from the Denver area, like you're a Colorado fan, right? Regardless of what the sports teams are, typically speaking. It's a little bit more tough in Canada because with the Blue Jays, they're out east. So for me, they're a 40-hour drive away. So it's hard to really make that part of my identity, much more difficult than it would be for people that are actually from Toronto. But with that being said, the Blue Jays are winning, everyone's watching. And I think if the Blue Jays are losing, obviously not as many people watching, but there's still people watching. They do a really good job of selling tickets out there, especially come playoffs. It's a very rowdy atmosphere come playoffs, and not even just playoffs, honestly. It's whenever they're winning. So it is tough to say that, yeah, if they're winning, they got the greatest fan base, because I don't really think that's a great argument, but that's kind of where they're at. And I think a lot of it is, again, because the identity, even with myself, like I'm a Blue Jays and a Raptors fan, but I would never want someone to identify me as a Toronto Maple Leafs fan, even though it's the same city. There's a disconnect where, yes, it is nice. Obviously, you have an entire country cheering for one fan base, but there's still a disconnect when it comes to the identity. So come honestly, the long days in May and June, I can't say there's going to be a ton of people watching every game, but enough to still get the main viewership ratings, and it helps that it's not hockey season. So they do get all the top sports channels, but it's not you're not going to see like Blue Jays flags flying about everywhere. You will see jerseys just walking down the street. So I wouldn't say it's mania by any means, but strong.
Okay. So we'll get into some free agent acquisitions and offseason moves so far for Toronto. Like we mentioned at the top, Toronto has probably maybe outside of San Diego been the biggest and have the most moves so far this offseason. We're gonna start with a couple smaller ones, and we'll get into the big fish later here. Tyler Chatwood obviously signed with them. Former Colorado Rocky, so I know him fairly well. But putting him in that rotation, I know he has spent a decent amount of time in the bullpen and in the starting rotation. Next season, where do you see him fitting in at for Toronto?
My guess is a starter, and the reason is because, I mean, we have Ryu, who's our ace, and he's going to be for years to come. Nate Pearson's coming off a rookie season where, I mean, the guy throws over 100 miles an hour and he's not a closer. So especially as a rookie, that's quite an arm on him. So I think that will be 1-2, but there's a bunch of question marks after 1-2. We still have Robbie Ray, so he might be there. But I think Chatwood fits into that 3 or 4 spot. And that being said, too, we have a bunch of young guys that are in the bullpen. And I think that they're more comfortable in the bullpen based on what they've shown. And when you're coming for career trajectory, if you can keep someone a starter rather than putting them in the bullpen, I think that's probably best. So I see Chatwood probably slated into the 3-4 spot.
And then Ross Stripling, I'm assuming you're probably along the same thoughts there, maybe kind of back end of the starter.
Yeah, exactly. If Chatwood's 3, I think Stripling's 4, and vice versa, or 4 or 5, depending where Robbie Ray is going to fit in if he still has an arm left.
Sure. Kirby Yates, signed him to a 1-year deal. One of the most, in my opinion, underrated closers in the game. I feel the guy does a pretty solid job and doesn't get a whole lot of respect for it. So I'm assuming he will be at the back end of your bullpen closing out games, or do you see him fitting in somewhere else?
You know, the Blue Jays last year, they didn't just have one closer, and I can kind of see it trending in that direction again. The beginning of the season, Sean Yamaguchi was kind of our closer, but then towards the end, it went to Rafael Dolis, and I think that Dolis kind of cemented himself there. He wasn't an all-star by any means, but he was good, and I'm hoping with our batting lineup that good will be good enough. I'm hoping we don't need excellence. So I think it'll be a battle between the two, but I'd still give Dolis probably the edge there.
Okay. Yeah, that's good to know. Obviously, anywhere Yates where he's going to fit in that back, in the bullpen somewhere, regardless of if he's closing games or not, that's going to be big for the younger guys in the bullpen, and people, even if they're not younger, that have been around a little bit, but Kirby Yates is a guy that has had success, so they can kind of look at him and be like, hey, what did you do? How can you help me? And even for the starters too, obviously not all of the things are going to be the same because it's different games that are playing there, but nonetheless, I think that's a great guy to add, not only to the rotation, but just a great team guy to have there as well too. Huge.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, we have a young bullpen too, a lot of rookies last year. So he's going to pitch, regardless if it's a closing role or a bullpen role. He's going to pitch, and he's going to pitch a lot, probably on a nightly or bi-nightly basis.
Marcus Semien, 1 year, $18 million deal, stole him from Oakland there. I'm assuming that he will probably be playing second base. It seems like Bichette's probably got the shortstop position locked up. I mean, I can't imagine him losing that, but I'm assuming Semien will be the second baseman for you guys then. Yeah,
that's my hope. I mean, I'd be pretty shocked if it wasn't. I don't see him taking over for Bichette, so I think the only thing that I could see is if Biggio doesn't move over because he played a lot of second base, but I think it's pretty fortified at this point, our infield, with the three big rookies and Semien obviously coming over. I think that the positions are pretty much solidified, which is nice because they're all going to be playing natural positions.
That's good. As far as Semien goes, I guess, 2 years ago in 2019, he hit 33 home runs, drove in 92, and hit 285. Last season, struggled a little bit, only hit 7 home runs, hit 223. Obviously, you got to take the short season into account there for that as well, too. Maybe he would have turned it around. I don't know. But before that, his career has been a fairly average career. Nothing too exciting, but, he's doing what he needs to do to keep a job. What are you expecting as far as what Semien can bring to the table? Do you think he'll be the 30-plus home run guy, or do you think he'll just be, the kind of solid guy that you can expect to do his job in the middle of the order there?
See, the nice thing about that signing is the whole 1 year. I mean, I could really care less about how much they gave him, considering there's no salary cap in baseball. It really doesn't matter. It's just the length of the deal that matters. It's only a year. So by all means, give him a show-me contract. And if he hits 30-plus home runs and 90-plus RBIs again, bring him back. And if not, we're going to have a lot of trade pieces. So I think it was about as perfect of a sign as you can get. I was potentially hoping maybe for a second baseman coming over in a trade, but zero complaints at all about having Semien. I think that he fits in perfectly there, and I'm happy with it. And the Blue Jays have a very short history of robbing the A's. We sent Brett Lawrie for Josh Donaldson straight across. Obviously, that worked out really well for us. But at the same time, the A's are a hard team because players perform when they're there, and not a lot of the time do they perform once they leave again. So it's hit and miss, but I do like the Blue Jays' track record with getting players, and especially high-caliber players from the A's.
You kind of mentioned that maybe initially before Semien that you were thinking maybe they should go in the trade market. Was there a certain name that you were kind of looking at as who you wanted Toronto to kind of key in on?
I really liked Ramirez out of Cleveland.
Okay.
I think Cleveland's kind of selling farm right now. I don't think I'll ever be able to wrap my head fully around that Lindor trade.
Yes.
So I was really thinking maybe getting him for second base, but like I said, it's a consolation prize, but it's about as good a consolation prize I could ask for.
Absolutely, yeah. I mean, he's a solid guy, good defender too. And like you mentioned, if he, balls out like he did 2 years ago and hits a 30-plus home runs, well, then you got him for a steal at $18 million. Yeah. But if he doesn't and he kind of plays bad, well, like you said, it's only $18 million and there's no salary cap. So that's got to be pretty good to see that situation there.
Yep, it's a comfortable situation. It's a comfortable signing, so I'm fine with that.
And then the big fish signing, Toronto getting George Springer, 6 years, $150 million. I don't really need to go too much in George Springer's track record. It kind of speaks for itself. The guy has produced always, and especially in the postseason. He's one of the best postseason hitters ever. I think as far as home runs go, he's like second or third on like the all-time home run list for postseason, which is crazy. He doesn't seem that old. So George Springer, was this a name that kind of right when the season ended, did you think Toronto actually had a chance to get him?
Based off all the rumors, I literally thought Toronto was going to sign every free agent there was. I think at some point, every player's name came onto the page, and the Blue Jays were like, yeah, we could get him. The good thing about management is the Blue Jays have always had good management. They have management that makes big moves. Alex Anthopoulos, I think, started that out, obviously, with the trade deadline acquisitions years ago when we got Tulo and David Price both on deadline day, which is just unheard of. And I don't even think Tulo was even rumored to leave, let alone actually leave. So, yeah, I really do think that about every big player that was on the market had Blue Jays written on them at some point. I heard Bauer rumors, LeMahieu rumors, Springer rumors. I think Springer was the biggest one from day one, so that actually didn't surprise me at all. It excited me, but it didn't surprise me because it did sound like it was something the Jays that were going to go heavily after.
Yeah, that's got to be nice to have a team that's, I've always been a guy that I do appreciate the Moneyball tactics, like the Oakland A's Moneyball type thing. I think that is a cool thing to see. But there comes a point in time where spending money, if you have it, you kind of just want to. I'm not saying willy-nilly throw out millions of dollars at people just because you can, but sometimes to make the next step, you have to spend that money. So being a fan of a team that's not afraid to spend that money, like you were kind of mentioning, that's got to be nice to see that they're in it to win it and they're trying to win.
It is, and I think that a lot of Blue Jays fans were hoping that this would have happened last year, even maybe a year before, when Biggio, Guerrero Jr., and Bichette came up. But I think it's perfect timing. I mean, you gave them time to be the guys, and because they were the guys, they got a little bit more confidence. But now you're bringing in George Springer, and you mentioned it, like he's good in the playoffs. His bread and butter is that he's clutch. So the fact that you got that playoff veteran, with a lineup of youngsters, I think was absolutely perfect for him.
I'm really excited to see how George Springer does do with Toronto this year. This is my mindset on George Springer is, obviously you got the whole trash can situation, which we're not going to really, don't need to get into that too much. Everyone at this point already knows what happened, so we don't have to dive into that situation again. I do like George. I feel like I can like George Springer now that he's not on Houston and he's on Toronto, and I can cheer for him and I can pull for him again. As far as, the Toronto fans, we're thinking, as I guess as much as you heard, was that a guy that they were kind of like, oh, he had that history with Houston, I don't want him, or were they pretty pumped like, screw it, I don't care what he did, this guy's a baller and he's hopefully helps us win games?
Yeah, luckily with that situation, I think the only person that really just does not have a massive shot with another team would be Altuve. I think Altuve would still do great with another team, and I think that he could fall into the laps and be a gem for another team. But I don't think Springer necessarily has that same kind of aura about him, which is interesting because based off the deeper analytics, it looks like Springer actually benefited the most off of that scandal. Yeah. Because he didn't have a mic on that people kind of put that under the rug, right? So no, I don't think there was much of that coming from Toronto. And it kind of goes with what you said, right? Like, and we talked about it before where you just said that now he's with Toronto, you could cheer for him. And that I think Toronto's a great destination for someone that has had a clouded past, even if the clouded past was only 1, maybe 2 years. You go up to Toronto and all of a sudden you're just the sweet, innocent man again because you play in sweet, innocent Canada, right? So no, I don't think that was an issue at all. I think it was you see talent and you go out and get it.
Sure. Yeah, that's good to hear. Now they did make another trade too, pretty recently, only a couple days ago, acquiring Steven Matz from the New York Mets. And then Toronto ended up trading Sean Reed-Foley, Yency Diaz, and Josh Winkowski. Obviously, Matz seems like to be the headliner, but some things that I've been seeing from your Twitter, you may think that Reed-Foley may actually be the main guy in this.
I was a big Reed-Foley guy.
Okay.
He played well for us. I had no reason not to, and I still unfortunately think he could be the best player coming out of that trade. And not only did the Mets get him, but they got another guy and only gave up one. So, I was sad to see Reed-Foley go. I understand that we needed pitching maybe with a little bit more experience, and with how bad the Mets were, I mean, you're not going to put up good numbers with them anyways last year. But luckily it was kind of what people would maybe categorize or title a smaller trade. So, I mean, at the end of the day, I'm not going to lose sleep over it. But if I had to give a win-loss right now, even if it doesn't show it on paper, I do think that's a loss for the Blues. Jays getting rid of Reed Foley.
Sure. Yeah, time will tell, obviously. We'll see what comes of this. At one point, Steven Matz was kind of one of the big names, or supposed to be a big name, with the Mets pitching. Obviously, when they had Matt Harvey, Syndergaard, DeGrom, Matz was kind of supposed to be that fourth guy that could have been the ace, anywhere else. And the few years that he's been in the league, he's kind of not been that ace. He's struggled a decent amount. So hopefully it's one of those things. I know a lot of guys in sports, and you see this all the time, Aaron, as well, too. Sometimes you just need a change of scenery. Sometimes going somewhere else can really help out a player and can kind of turn their career around.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and that's fair. And if it happens, great. This is a time, and when any time that I am betting against my team, I'm always happily proven wrong. And I think this is one of those times. I talked about it. I kind of have this superstition with past trades that history repeats itself. Like I said with the Oakland A's earlier, and we do not have a good history with trading pitchers with the Mets. We got R.A. Dickey and a couple other players, but the big piece of that was DeGrom going the other way, or what turned into be who DeGrom is now anyways. So I'm just really hoping, especially because it is another couple young guys that went over, that we don't see that again.
Yeah. That'll be interesting to see. I'm intrigued to see how Steven Matz does this year. And maybe for your sake, maybe Reed Foley won't play well and Steven Matz will turn into a Cy Young pitcher. And then you can feel good about it.
It's true.
So, you kind of mentioned before, Toronto seems like this offseason that their name has been attached to just about any of the big names in free agency. There is still one really big name, I think the biggest, in my opinion, and Trevor Bauer, still left on the market. Do you think, I don't know if you have any insider information or anything or not, but do you think Trevor Bauer will sign with Toronto, or do you think Toronto's kind of done looking at free agents and they're pretty set to go into the regular season with who they have now?
Yeah, I think it's tough with a pandemic year. However, that's going to be affecting the financial opportunities that the Jays might have. Now, I say financial opportunities, and we just spent $200 million on two players. So, I mean, if there was any financial strain, I think it's out the window now. I believe it was The Athletic. That could be wrong, but I read from at least a bigger name company that he had at least visited the facilities out in Toronto. My feeling is that he ends up on one of the LA teams. Fingers crossed, it's not the Dodgers. I don't see him signing with the Blue Jays at this point, which I think probably our pitching was what we needed most, with exception to an outfielder and probably a a catcher. I think I'm not going to say too little too late, because there's been a ton already, but I think that ship is starting to sail a little bit.
Sure. Yeah, we'll definitely have to keep close eyes onto that. What's really been really intriguing about this free agency experience with Trevor Bauer, as opposed to a free agent in probably just about any other sport, is that there really hasn't been like he's leaning towards this way or he's leaning towards that way. He has stayed pretty right down the middle with everything. He says when he's going to visit somewhere, and that's it. So I think, and I don't know if you have any comments on that. I just think that's kind of cool to see that, he's not showing his cards. He's just going out there doing his thing, and where he goes, he goes. Yeah,
it's interesting because I agree with you, but in a very twisted sense, because you say he's not showing his cards. I think that he's showing all of his cards. But I think that in showing every single one of the cards he has, it ties into what you just said. And I think kind of what the underlying meaning was is no one has any idea. So he's showing all of his cards, but he's not showing you which card he's going to play. Which I think is exactly what you're trying to get at by saying he's not showing his cards. Is simply the meaning of that is no one has any idea. And no one does, but he is being so unique in the sense where he's like, hey, Blue Jays fan, should I come out here? And then he gets 10 million new followers, like Zach Boychuk, following and unfollowing everyone on Twitter. And then he said, okay, I'm going to go to the Angels, and gets 10 million more followers and all the rumors. So no one would have any idea, but he might be the most outspoken prospect for a team, outspoken free agent in terms of where am I going to end up? And no one has any idea.
Yeah. Speaking of Zach Boychuk, when I was in high school, he did follow me for a short period of time, and I tried to get him to come on my hockey podcast then, and he responded, but I asked him when he could and never said anything. So
Yeah, he's I think I've been followed and unfollowed by him and Adam Gaudette on the Canucks, just on tandem, probably 3 or 4 times. No idea why, but
I think Jose Bautista, kind of the same thing, because I know he followed me at one point too. Like he followed everyone, and I don't think he follows me anymore.
oh, I would have screenshotted that one. Didn't get that follow.
I'll have to pull it up in the receipts later, see if I can't find it.
I do have Carly Rae Jepsen still following me though, so I'll take the win.
Really?
I do, yeah. When I was like 18 or 19, I sent her a pickup line, and basically the deal was if she liked it, she'd follow me back, and she liked it, and she's never unfollowed me. So.
Wow, what was the pickup line?
Well, you know her biggest song, "Call Me Maybe," and there's a very succinct reason I remember this because it's easy to remember. But the first line in that song, if I remember right, is "I threw a wish in the well. Don't ask me, I'll never tell." So I quoted that, and then I said, "Just kidding. My wish was for a follow back." But also, mind you, this is when she only had like 15,000 followers and probably actually checked her mentions. I'd imagine that ship has sailed for her now.
So is that the first pickup line you used on Marissa when you were trying to go after her for the first time? Is that how you got the in?
You know, I definitely was not. I don't remember what my first one was. There probably was just a bunch of garbage ones, and then it was like, okay, here's a pity date, and then it worked out for the best. Is my guess.
Hey, whatever gets the job done. You're engaged now. Hope to be married soon with COVID and everything. Who knows when are you planning on doing that? Kind of a quick commercial break here, but.
Yeah, no, it's June 10th is the goal. It's supposed to be June 11th last year. Obviously, we had to postpone. But the biggest thing is the Canadian border is still closed shut. So honestly, if it was a bunch of people coming from around the U.S., especially because it's in Utah, which is a state that's very open, I think we'd be A-okay. But it's just a little bit more tough with the Canadian border being closed.
Gotcha. Well, congrats on that. Obviously, I've wished that before, but that is really cool to see. And hopefully everything goes as planned and you're able to have it just like you were supposed to have it last year.
That's the goal. I appreciate that.
Yeah, no problem. So now we'll get into some predictions for your Toronto Blue Jays next season. How do you see them finishing? Assuming it sounds like we're going to be having a full 162 from everything that I've heard so far. So how do you see Toronto finishing? Now, if you have an actual game, prediction, that's phenomenal. If you just want to pick where they're finishing the division, I'm 100% okay with that too.
See, the division's tough because you have the Yankees who didn't necessarily make any changes, but they brought back LeMahieu, which is exactly what they needed.
Right.
And then you have the Rays who did have a big change with Snell leaving, but I think that's still a very good team. Mind you, the pitching was kind of their sweet spot. The Rays always have prospects that just come out of nowhere, though. So they're not like the White Sox or even the Jays in this case, where 5 years before you can tell, okay, this season they're going to do well. They just have guys that always come out of the woodwork. So I'm going to put the Blue Jays at third in the division. I don't think we finished below the Orioles. I feel comfortable saying that. And the Red Sox didn't make any moves other than losing Pedroia today, and Jackie Bradley Jr. never got another contract extension. So their pitching is still garbage. They really only have one guy if they even go, because Chris Sale is going to be injured with his Tommy John. So their pitching is garbage. They don't even have a full batting order right now, and I don't think they even have an outfield. So I'm not worried about the Red Sox either. Red Sox, you might be able to tell, are like a bottom 3 team for me. So I'll take all the time I want to talking about that. But I think that it's smart to say third. But with the 2 teams that would be above us, I still think we could finish third and get 90 wins. It's just the competition is so hard in that division, and it always has been, and it always will be, because there's a lot of money over there. So,
do you think 90 wins will be enough to make the postseason this year?
I will say yes. Okay. The nice thing about, if you're a 90-win team at third, someone's got to be eating those losses from outside the division. If you have 3 teams with 90-plus wins all in the same place, again, the losses got to come from somewhere. And I think the Orioles and the Red Sox will probably be chowing down on those for a while, but I think there's going to be a lot of teams from outside the division that get beat up on too by them. So I'll say yes in this case.
Now, do you want to go make a prediction to think how far will Toronto go? Obviously, it's early. You never know what can happen, but just, way too early predictions, as they say. Where do you see Toronto finishing as far as playoffs go?
I think we get a second-round exit, and I think that it's going to teach our young guys a lot. The reason I say second round is because I think that we have the pitching to get us through a 5-game series. It's a little different when you have guys pitching on 4 days rest or 3 days if needed. And if you only have one legitimate pitcher, which I mean, I think that Pearson could get there and maybe be an ace, but I don't think year 2 is that for him. So with just Ryu doing that, I don't think that it's a format that's built for the playoffs when it comes to pitching. So I think the hitting will definitely be there, but unless you're going to average anywhere from 6 to 8 runs a night, I just don't know that the pitching will get us there. So I'll give him one. I'll get him past the first round, but I think that we'll probably stop there and learn from it.
Okay. Yeah, I would probably agree with you. I think Toronto can be a team that can make it to the playoffs. Third place, I think, is probably pretty realistic. It seems like, and you hit it right on the head with Tampa. They're one of those teams, and we've seen it how many times now. They trade their best star, their best player. They get prospects back, but it seems like that player is almost forgotten about immediately because the person that's taking their place is now one of the best in the game at whatever they're doing. Yeah. So they'll probably be at the top again.
Yep, no, I very much agree. I think third is realistic, and I think that if I said any higher for the people that listen or watch this, I'd probably get a little bit of hate coming my way. But I feel comfortable and neutral at 3. So remember, Canada's nice and innocent. I don't want to hear it.
Oh, man. So that's about as far as predictions go. I want to obviously get a little more insight into you as a Toronto fan. So this is kind of a fun little thing I like to do when the guests come on. I didn't ask you about this, so it's going to be off the top of the noggin. So you better be ready. You have all the time. It's not rapid fire or anything.
Yeah.
So who is your favorite Toronto Blue Jay of all time and why?
Jose Bautista, easy. I think that that's the jersey I'm wearing. You can't see the back, but I think he brought the whole country together with one bat flip. Even before that, he came from, I believe it was the Pirates. I'm kind of dating myself back, but he didn't have a lot of love, and then he turned it on in Toronto, and he did it every year, year after year after year, and it was so sad when he left. People in Toronto loved him. You had kids drawing the beard on their face. You had everyone that loved the guy, and there's no reason for me to say anyone else. But if I had to kind of date myself a little bit more back, I'd probably say Carlos Delgado, because the one of the first Blue Jays games that I can remember watching, he hit 4 home runs in one game.
Oh.
And I would only been probably 8 or 9 at that time. That's the earliest game I can remember. Obviously, I'll give all my respect to the doc, to Holiday, but unfortunately, I think that typically speaking, it's the batters that are the more flashy players that get all the love. So I'll say Bautista recently, but Delgado also.
Carlos Delgado, I'd never really watched Toronto games when I was younger. It was mainly just Colorado Rockies because that's what was on TV. But, in growing up, Carlos Delgado is a guy that, in doing research on and watching videos and stuff on, that guy is like one of the most underlooked power hitters I think I have seen. I don't know if ever, but he's probably top 5. I mean, he could mash, and rarely anyone ever talks about him anymore.
And a switch hitter too. If I remember correctly, I'll have to look it up, and maybe I'll do that while you're talking. But those 4 home runs, one of them was his offhand. So he had 3 home runs on one side of the plate and 1 on the other, all in the same game. So no, I very much agree.
Impressive. Carlos Delgado, Jose Bautista. I love both of those picks big time. I was really happy to see too. Everyone, and I remember this specifically, and I remember it just kind of infuriated me a little bit. When Jose Bautista had the season when he hit, I believe, 54 home runs, if I'm not mistaken, I remember there was a ton of people that were saying, it's like, oh, there's no way he's legit. He's got to be taking steroids, something. He barely had any home runs before, and now he's popping off. And I'm like, guys can struggle and then be good. It doesn't mean that they're cheating. And then it showed the next few years after that. He didn't hit 54, but he was still hitting a lot of home runs, and it just showed that, maybe this guy actually is just a good hitter.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think he was kind of the guy that pulled the Blue Jays back onto the map too. Obviously, in the early 90s, we had success, but the early to mid to even late 2000s, we had players that were good, but just not necessarily a ton of success, and no reason really for the whole country to come together like they did with Bautista there.
Now, who is your favorite Major League Baseball player that was not on Toronto? Now, they maybe could have played there at one point, but they had to spend the majority of their career elsewhere.
Yeah, Tim Lincecum. I loved Tim Lincecum.
Okay, the freak. I like that. What's the reason behind Tim Lincecum?
So when I told you, I followed the Giants and the A's a little bit more, and it was 100% because of Tim Lincecum. I actually visited San Francisco when I was 16, and he wasn't pitching, which I was so sad. But I went back when I was 21, and I did get to see him pitch. It was just everything about his form was unbelievable to me. How far he reached back, his stride, the length of it. I think the hair helped, just everything top to bottom. And I also remember watching him go toe to toe with Roy Halladay when they were playing the Rangers in the playoffs one year, and twice he went toe to toe with a future Hall of Famer. And like I said, I would never say anything bad about Halladay. Obviously, because of what's happened, but also because he's a big thing with the Blue Jays organization. But the fact that Tim Lincecum went toe to toe and came out on top twice, I thought was super impressive. So I've always loved Tim Lincecum.
That's really cool. I like that answer. I feel obviously I saw him a lot as a Rockies fan, pitching against the Giants, being in the same division. But it's one of those things that, as much as I didn't like going against him, I did respect him a lot because he was, for a period of time, one of, if not the best pitcher in the game for a stretch of years there. And it was really cool to be able to watch him up close in person at a couple Rockies games when they would come to Denver and play. So that was really cool to see.
Yeah, it's special. And I got to meet his dog once too, which was a really nice thing. We were just at the a Giants game early one time when I was there. For whatever reason, I've never been to a Blue Jays game in Toronto. I've been to 2 in Minnesota. But yeah, I've seen way more Giants games than any other team. And yeah, he has I believe it was a bulldog of some sort. I believe it was a French bulldog. But yeah, he was at the game early. I was just there watching batting practice like I always do. And yeah, his dog came out, and I mean, I didn't go up and like touch it by any means. So when I say that's kind of a very loose term, but I was within 10 feet of his dog, so it was cool.
Well, that's pretty cool. Yeah, I mean, I don't think a lot of people can say they've been within arm's reach of Tim Lincecum's dog before. I mean, it's got to be a proud thing there for you.
And if I remember right, his name was actually Cy, obviously short for Cy Young. So I thought
really that's cool.
Classic too.
That's funny. That's funny. Now, what is your favorite Toronto Blue Jays memory? So it can be something from a regular season game, postseason, whatever. What is your favorite memory as a Toronto fan?
I think the Delgado, I mean, the kind of things that we've talked about already, the Delgado 4 home run was huge. And again, that'll always just live with me because it's really the first memory that I have like taken with me from watching a Blue Jays game. The bat flip was obviously a very good memory, but it was interesting for me because I was watching the game alone.
Really?
I was in Salt Lake City. I had just started college, and my roommate, he would watch most of the games with me, but his buddy had come over just to throw the football around or something. So I had actually rented out the entertainment room in our complex and was just watching it alone on a big, probably 10-foot projector. And I was giving him updates every now and then. My parents actually really tune into sports when things get going, hockey year round. But when the Blue Jays are in the playoffs, that's what my mom talks about, which is actually a really fun family dynamic. And same with my dad, especially football with my dad. So I was kind of going back and forth. In that year, I was actually I believe I was in Arizona during our first round of the playoffs, which was against the Rangers, which was obviously nice because it was the same year that Bautista got punched in the face, and then we beat him in the playoffs, right? So, the bat flip was against the Rangers, sorry. So, and I had FaceTimed my mom for other games because they weren't playing it in Arizona for whatever reason. So I was watching the game over FaceTime. But the bat flip was definitely heard around the world for me. So that would be hard. Taking out the 2 very obvious ones that I've talked about, it actually may have been Bautista's first game. Or not Bautista, sorry, Guerrero Jr.'s first game. And the reason I say that is because it was only a couple years ago, but I'm watching on my computer, and it reminded me exactly of how the media was treating Connor McDavid when he first came in. And it was nice to see the media go after a sport without the team being the best team in the league the way that they were when Guerrero Jr. was making his debut. I was honestly just the batting practice that rings true. I was watching it on the computer, and there was probably 20 to 25 reporters and camera crews and everything just taking pictures. And it was nice because I just felt like the sport was getting treated like a hockey team would.
That's cool. I guess want to touch on the Jose Bautista bat flip. For me, that is probably one of my favorite, not just baseball memories, but sports memories. it's one of those things that I remember exactly where I was, what I was doing when I was doing. It's a similar situation. I was sitting in my room on my bed. I was just laying on my bed watching the game on my phone, and I remember when Bautista hit that home run, like I found myself like cheering and getting genuinely excited as if I was a Toronto Blue Jays fan, because it was just the whole game was just wild. Obviously you have the Russell Martin situation at catcher where it kind of seemed like, maybe things were over there. And Bautista says, I'm putting the team on my back and I'm going to hit this nuke and get it out of here. I mean, that was with the camera shaking and the fans just getting electric. That was awesome.
Yeah, no, 100%. And that's why I say, like, there are definitely kind of the down days and just like with any team, though, I mean, you look in any ballpark and chances are if it's a 1 or a noon game on a Tuesday afternoon, it's not going to be sold out, right? But after that series, when they had won that game, like the Blue Jays fans all stayed there. They were cheering "Go Jays, go!" All the players did laps around the field where they were getting drunk and spraying fans, and it was just everything with that game because there was such a rivalry built up with what happened with the Rangers earlier that year. And then that game, I mean, the game was momentarily postponed twice because fans were throwing beer cans and stuff onto the field because they just did not agree with the ump. And then what you said with Russell Martin when he was trying to throw the ball back to the pitcher after the pitch and it goes off the bat and they score the go-ahead run and just everything, right? And I think that after that go-ahead run, the feeling was kind of a deflation for the Jays. And then there's a 3-run bomb that comes up and it was, no, like we're here. And obviously that luck turned the next series when we're playing Kansas City, and there's what I will always believe, the fans that reached over to catch the ball and said they did whatever, but at least we did get our moment with that, and it was a perfect timing. It was very sweet.
Absolutely. Now, I do want to ask a couple other Toronto memories before I get into another question here. Where does I feel sometimes the Edwin Encarnacion home run, the walk-off against Baltimore, sometimes kind of gets lost in the back burners a little bit. What was your thoughts on that one when that happened?
No, it definitely does. The nice part about that is to this day, I think the Orioles made the wrong decision because if I remember right, they had Zach Britton in the bullpen and they didn't put him in. And then, sorry?
No, yeah, I believe you're correct there.
Yeah. It was either Britton or one of their other big stars that was specifically a reliever. They didn't put in because they were going to put him in the next inning, and then Encarnacion just walks it off. So I think that he is also, because he was in the Bautista era, that he gets overlooked just as a player a lot. I love Bautista as well, but Encarnacion, actually, when he went to the Indians, I went to a Twins-Indians game sitting in the outfield with my Blue Jays jersey on and made a sign for Encarnacion. And I mean, he obviously was never going to be in the outfield, and he wasn't that game either. But when, who was it? It might have been Kepler. I can't remember who it was, but someone read the sign, and I was like, "Go tell him," and he did. And from the dugout, he gave me a thumbs up. So
really,
that's awesome. I'll always love Encarnacion as well. Plus, I mean, who hates a baby face, right?
Oh, exactly right. And the parrot too. The parrot's got to be one of the best home run celebrations out there. Just keeping the straight arm in there.
Yeah, talk about a neutral celebration too, right? Well, everyone's getting mad about the bat flip, and he's just like, "I'm going to keep doing this until someone gets mad at me."
And then the final one, the Vlad Jr. home run derby. That was one of the best home run derbies I've ever seen. And then Vlad Jr. was the big thing before that. I think the other one was the Josh Hamilton one in New York, obviously. But the funny thing about both of those things is everyone will remember the Vlad Guerrero Jr. and the Josh Hamilton, but then neither of those guys ended up winning. Todd Frazier obviously won it for Cincinnati when he was there. But what was your thoughts on that and that memory for Vlad Jr.?
The nice thing about that is that Vlad Jr., like, people were protesting him even being there because his year was just not good, right? And so I think that's really when people finally understood who he was. I mean, the fact that it comes down to the power behind those swings too. I mean, you see Aaron Judge and it's almost like a golf swing sometimes. Like, it's just effort, right? But when you see Guerrero, like, it looks like he's trying to break down a brick wall with his bat. And it was incredible. Obviously, he was pretty deflated. I think with that amount of motion and that just like hip movement, it's going to be hard on your joints swinging that bat that hard 100 times in a matter of maybe 10 minutes, right? So I don't think his body could have taken another round, and it kind of proved true in the final, mind you. But yeah, that was huge. And again, I think it put his name on the map. That was the first time I know my fiance's heard of him, and that's actually still all she remembers him by is that home run derby.
I suppose it's a good thing to remember him by then.
Oh, 100%. But it's going to be interesting looking at him in a jersey that doesn't have a bunch of X's in front of the L on the high stick. So I'm happy for him. I loved Big Vladdy though. I think one of my favorite pictures is seeing the picture of him and his dad at an All-Star game, and he's on the mound and he's got the exact same body when he was 2 that he did when he was 22, right? So happy for him and whatever he did, but yeah, I hope he knows that we really did love every centimeter of that waist before the weight loss too.
And I believe I said Todd Frazier. I meant Pete Alonso was the one that he ended up going up against in that. But yeah, nonetheless, I agree that was a great moment. Yeah. And then the final one, favorite baseball moment that did not have to do with a Toronto team or Toronto player.
I'll tell you, it had to do with Aaron Fitzner when he was 9. He was playing on the first team. We were playing the Fox this game. I remember.
Okay.
Fox had all the players. And mind you, baseball was underhand. It was softball technically, but fast pitch. So we were. Our team was down 6-0 after like 2 innings, and they put me at pitcher, and I didn't let any runs in until the 4th inning, where I let all the runs in. But again, it was the team that had all the good players, and I'm up to bat in the 7th, and we're down by 3, and I hit a grand slam. Didn't go over the fence. It just happened to go far enough that the little 9-year-old's legs couldn't run fast enough and throw it far enough home. But we tied that game, so probably that. But if we're talking MLB, it's what I would assume. You can tell that I didn't play sports collegiately because I'm talking about what happened when I was 9.
Well, it's okay. I didn't either.
you were a dodgeball champion. Give yourself some credit.
That's true. 4-time dodgeball champion. I don't want to toot my own horn, but we were probably the best dynasty in Bethany intramural history. So
yeah, back to back to back to back. Mine would probably. No one really likes this World Series because it was a sweep, but I liked the fact just watching all 4 games of the Giants sweep the World Series.
Okay.
Back in 12. Yeah, it was 12, I believe. Loved every part of that. I think that it's not good for TV, and I think there's a lot of broadcast people who weren't happy. But yeah, I really did just love every single part of that. So I'd probably have to say that. Otherwise, I have no reason to hate the Cubs, and seeing them win the pennant is huge. So
that was awesome.
No issue with that either.
That was awesome. Yeah. Well, all great memories that you have. I think the best one is hitting the grand slam at 9 years old. I mean, you can't beat that.
Because of that grand slam, so that was just like a house league team. Because of that grand slam, and the coach of that team was the coach of the travel team. I actually they called it rep because you represent your city. But I actually made the travel team, and I played on it for 1 more year until I moved because of that one swing. So it was a good moment for me.
The swing heard around Canada.
That was it. Yeah, we're around rural northern St. Albert, which you probably don't even know the name of that city. But it's outside, and it's a big baseball town.
Oh, okay. Well, yeah, I'll do my research on it. If I go on Google and look up that town, I better see something where it mentions Aaron Fitzner hitting a grand slam, or else I'm going to be disappointed. Disappointed.
Chances are you're going to be pretty disappointed, but still look it up.
What did people call you the next Carlos Delgado after that swing?
Dude, they did until I was the number 9 hitter on the team the next year on the rep team. So, but I had my 20 minutes of fame.
Well, that's all that matters, right? You got to remember someone for the best thing that they did. No one, I'm not going to remember them for the worst thing.
Exactly. Yeah.
That's awesome. So I think we're at the end of the show now. Aaron, is there anything Toronto Blue Jays wise, baseball wise, anything that you want to bring up or mention here?
No, I'm just excited for people to watch them. I think that's the biggest thing for me is with Canada sports, especially when you only have the one team. So I guess Toronto would be in this too, but people in the U.S., it's not really a huge market to watch Canadian teams unless something great is going on, right? So I'm just excited for people to watch the team from small Canada, because I think that they're actually, like you said earlier, they're just reason to watch them. They have young players, you have good players, and maybe with exception of Springer, there's not even a single thing to hate. You just have a bunch of guys wanting to play baseball for the love of playing baseball. So I'm really excited for people to watch and hopefully to turn some heads.
Absolutely. Yeah, and I hope they do turn some heads because I want our predictions to be right. I'd love to see Toronto in the playoffs.
Yeah, we heard it here first. 3rd in the division, 90-win season.
That's right. That's right. So yeah, like I mentioned, the end of the show, Aaron, would you like to give out some social media handles where the fans can follow you, talk some sports, talk some Edmonton Oilers with you?
Yeah, I am on Twitter. I am Dwarf Lord 420. Just kidding. I'm Aaron Fitzner on everything. So I actually, when you and I were doing our play-by-play, I think my name was Fatsner on everything.
Yeah, it was.
Because I was a chubby kid growing up, and my Boy Scout leader called me Fatsner, which looking back might actually have been pretty detrimental to my mental health. But, yeah, because our handles were going to come up on TV, I just changed everything to Aaron Fitzner because Fatsner didn't seem overly professional, which was probably a good choice. It's just Aaron Fitzner on everything, straight across.
Well, that's good to know. Aaron, it loves talking sports, obviously. Hockey definitely is a number one. I do see some Toronto Blue Jays stuff on there, too. I'll let you do it just because I like you, Aaron. I will let you get like a 2-minute plug here for some Edmonton Oilers talk. I'll give you 2 minutes.
I thought you were going to admit that McDavid's better than McKinnon. I was so excited to hear it come out of your mouth.
Well, you know I can't do that, Aaron.
No, I know you can't. Edmonton Oilers talk. I mean, is there anyone even fighting for the Art Ross Trophy anymore, or the Ted Lindsay? I mean, we're already double everyone's points, which is sad because we're double everyone's points, but we're 5-6.
Oh.
But, yeah, we got big things coming. Honestly, if you check my Twitter, I will hate the Oilers every second day, and I'll love them the other days. So,
folks, if you want to follow a true, and I'm saying truest fan and the purest fan you're going to find when it comes to watching a live sports game, Aaron Fitzner is going to be the guy. If you follow him on Twitter, he is going to tell you if Edmonton is playing awful, he'll tell you they're playing awful. Mm-hmm. But if they're playing great, he's going to tell you they're playing great. He just says it how it is.
Yeah, no, I'm not here to protect any fanhood. I don't need to prove to anyone that I'm an Oilers fan. I could open the door next to me and you'd see 10 Oilers jerseys. But no, I'm just happy they're sports, and I'm happy for a baseball season that seems like it might have a little bit of normality. So yeah, happy they're sports right now.
Absolutely, I could not have said it better myself. That's for sure. But folks, if you would like to follow Nick or I's Twitter account, you can follow myself at Lucas_Dorton. I did have to change it after the hockey night. We both had to change our Twitter handles. I think mine was like Lmaster17 or something like that. Seems like some World of Warcraft name that I'd have on there. So I had to change that to Lucas_Dorton.
The best part about that is I was kidding when I said Dwarf Lord, but your Lmaster is pretty much the exact same idea.
If you want to follow Nick on Twitter, you can follow him at Doetkott. If you want to follow our Twitter page for the podcast at DND_podcast, capital D's, capital P for that. So be sure to follow that. Aaron, I want to thank you for coming on the show, talking some Toronto. I hope you had a good time. I hope you enjoyed it. Maybe you did. Maybe you didn't. I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, it's not going to change if I didn't, right?
I don't know. Guess that's for you to find out.
No, it was great. No, this was a lot of fun. It was a fast hour and 7 minutes, and yeah, I enjoyed every single second of it. You were a great host, so thank you very much for your talents there.
Well, thank you. I appreciate that. And I'd love to have you on in the future too, maybe to talk some hockey next time.
I have a thing or two to talk about that topic.
Okay, well, that's good. I'll be expecting a lot then.
Yeah, I don't know if you noticed, but I got a Gretzky hat on. It's the most subtle Gretzky hat you could ever see, but it's a goat.
I see a little goat there.
That's it, and that the 1.921 is his points per game record. 1.921 points per game throughout his career.
So obviously, you think Gretzky's the GOAT. I know a lot of people think Gordie Howe's the GOAT. What separates? At the end of the show, but we can talk a little bit of hockey. I don't care. My show. I can do whatever I want on here. Mm-hmm. So, what in your opinion do you think makes Gretzky the GOAT?
I think what separates the two.
I think he is.
Yeah, I think what separates the two is 1,000 games and 1,000 points, both in favor of Gretzky. He played way less games and had way more points. But I mean, one of my most prized possessions is at my parents' house. I guess I shouldn't say they're mine; they're my dad's, but I think they're in the will for me, so I'll say they're mine. But the Gretzky and Gordie Howe actually played on the same team in 1979, I believe it was, or 78, in the WHA before Gretzky got sold to the Oilers. They played together, and they made 150 jerseys that go together, and they're signed by both. Gordie Howe signed at Mr. Hockey like he usually does, but we have both jerseys for Howe and for Gretzky.
Oh, wow.
Nothing but respect for Gordie Howe. I mean, I believe, if I remember right, his last All-Star game, he was like 52 years old and he had like 24 of them or something. So there's absolutely no way that I could say anything bad about Howe. Yeah, he was a class act. He's a gentleman. He was phenomenal at hockey, but there's too many Gretzky records that'll never be touched for it to even be a good conversation about who the best hockey player ever was.
Sure. Well, I appreciate your input on that. I know all the fans are probably wondering, Aaron Fitzner is going to end the debate, Gretzky or Howe tonight. So you heard it here, folks, with Wayne Gretzky.
Yeah.
But anyways, folks, thank you for listening to episode 46 of the Dorton and Doetkott Debate Podcast. Be sure to like, follow, and subscribe. And until next time, for Aaron Fitzner and myself, we are out.